in the room in person and online. Welcome to the Geneva Urban Debate on urban health, with a special focus on pandemic preparedness and response from the city's point of view. My name is András Szörényi. I will be your moderator today. The Geneva Urban Debates have been conceived by the Geneva Cities Hub and UN Habitat to raise practical and pragmatic debate on current topics, and we believe health is definitely a current topic today, between local and regional governments, member states, UN agencies, diplomats, academia, as well as NGOs. And for that reason, first and foremost, I would like to invite the two co-organizers, Ms. Antu Duong, co-director of Geneva Cities Hub, and Mr. Graham Alabaster, the chief of UN Habitat Geneva office, to say a couple of welcome words.
Thank you, András. And I'll be super short, because I think the topic is so interesting, you don't really want to hear from me. So my name is Antu Duong, as you said. I'm the co-director of the Geneva Cities Hub, which is an organization that seeks to better connect cities to Geneva-based global governance. Concretely, what we do here at the Geneva Cities Hub is that we're looking for entry points for cities and other local and regional governments into multilateral processes and entities and bodies, to make sure that we bring the voice of cities, local and regional governments into that ecosystem. Indeed, we believe that bringing the voice of cities, of local authorities, enable policymakers to hear about innovative local solutions that can help them address global challenges. To do so, we work with cities, again, local authorities, local regional governments, city networks, states, international organizations, civil society, the whole ecosystem here in Geneva and beyond, and make sure that they sit together, they talk, and they move forward. Cities have indeed, as you've said, been under particular limelight during the pandemic, where most of the cases were and remain concentrated. They were on the front line of the response. We heard a lot about cities during the pandemic, and they will remain in the limelight for the next health emergency. Therefore, we're convinced that they should be involved and heard in the global debate on health. And we therefore hope that this event will somehow contribute to bringing the voice of cities on the international stage. Thank you so much, András.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, András. Well, hello everyone, I'm delighted to be with you today. I'm the head of UN Habitat's office here in Geneva. Our headquarters is in Nairobi in Kenya. And of course, we're the agency within UN who looks after or leads on sustainable urbanization. Now, urban, of course, is becoming increasingly important, because I'm sure most of you know, by 2050, 3/4 of the world will live in an urban agglomeration of some kind. And that's not just big cities, like Mexico or whatever, it's also the smaller urban agglomerations. And in fact, over the coming years, that's where most of the urban growth is going to be, in the smaller urban centres. Many of those 75% in 2050 are going to live in cities which have not yet been built. Okay, so we're in a unique position now to influence how that urban space is designed, how it's planned, the sort of infrastructure it has, and how it's managed. And obviously, we've heard for many years about the need to focus on the environment and all these things, but now is the time where we really need to put more attention into designing urban space better for health. And I think this is why we have such an important window of opportunity now. We learned from the COVID pandemic that, understanding urban is critical to not only manage outbreaks, but also the role that urban space can play in preventing outbreaks of disease. Also, of course, not just communicable diseases, but non-communicable diseases, the lifestyle diseases. So the design of urban is so critically important. So That's one of the reasons why we're investing a lot more efforts from Habitat's side in health. We have a big new agreement with WHO. We're working with our colleagues there to support their work, and this is one of the great opportunities this afternoon to talk about some of these ideas that we're having. So we're delighted to be a co-convener with the City Hub and to contribute this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Graham, and we are looking forward to continue this great cooperation. Regarding today's topic, if you remember, the first lockdown in Switzerland happened to happen exactly 2 years ago on the 16th of March 2020. But unfortunately, COVID is not over yet. If we open the news, we see that in China, for example, just a couple of days ago, the whole city of Shenzhen was under lockdown, as well as just on Monday, the residents of Jilin province was placed under quarantine, which shows that that today's topic is very, very relevant. We need to listen to the different stakeholders, and today we will listen to mayors, to experts from different international organizations. Some housekeeping to start very quickly. As I mentioned, it's a co-organization between the Geneva Cities Hub and UN Habitat, but we are delighted to welcome also two distinguished colleagues from WHO, Ms. Natalie Röbel, who will join us online, and Mr. Ludi Prapancha Suryantoro, who is with us here in person. We are delighted, Ludi, to welcome you. We will have 3 mayors from 3 different continents, different countries, different cities, but also colleagues from UCLG, as well as from the academia, from the Universidad del Valle Cali. Please note that this is a public event, so we cannot guarantee the confidentiality of what you say. However, I would invite all attendees to respect if a speaker asks specifically not to be quoted. The event will be registered and put on our YouTube channel afterwards. To keep time, I will ask all the speakers to limit their intervention to 5 minutes. And to advance as quickly as possible to the core of our discussion, I would like to propose to start with our first speaker, and I would invite Dr. Mabbanamaguru Merard, the Deputy Mayor of Kigali, Rwanda, who will join us online to start today's debate, to show his city's experiences, some best practices, or some recommendations for the future. I hope, Dr. Merard, you are with us. And if yes, the floor is yours for 5 minutes. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you so very much for this opportunity. Chief of UN Habitat Geneva Office, Co-Director of Geneva Cities Hub, mayors and vice mayors, speakers here representing your respective cities and institutions, participants. I'm pleased to be with you in this platform to exchange with you the experience on how we at the city of Kigali are facing the COVID pandemic. The first case of COVID-19 pandemic was identified in Rwanda in March 2020, and it was in the city of Kigali. From that time, the citizens of the city of Kigali were significantly economically and socially affected. The city of Kigali 3 times experienced lockdowns, totaling almost 6 months, in which the citizens have seriously been affected, especially the informal operators such as small traders, carpenters, workers in the construction industry, just to mention some few. The city of Kigali appreciates the collaboration and partnership with digital strategies through the Partnership for Health Facilities Initiative, which supported us from the declaration of the first case of COVID pandemic in the city of Kigali, especially in awareness and communication campaigns organized by the city of Kigali. In 2020, at the start of the pandemic, the city of Kigali worked with the Partnership for Healthy Cities to launch a communication campaign about the importance of adherence to public health and COVID-19 preventive measures, as it was regularly stipulated by the Cabinet of the Republic of Rwanda. The campaign was done with the messaging displayed on 8 large digital screens around the city and in 6 bus terminals. Mobile sound vehicles touring public spaces daily, and a wide presence of social media. In the city of Kigali, we rose to the challenge of responding to COVID-19 pandemic and continue to make incredibly difficult decisions to protect people's health while maintaining economic stability and social cohesion. The home-based care approach. Let me join as the panelists. I was saying that the home-based care approach is one of the strategies which is now facilitating the management of COVID-19 cases in light of cost and community engagement, working closely with the community health workers and village leaders. These above mentioned campaign reached approximately 100% of the urban population using television, radios, social media, and in-person outreach activities. We earned trust from Kigali's communities, positioning the city government as the main source of accurate information on the COVID pandemic. As the vaccines became our passport to transition out of the COVID-19 pandemic and toward recovery, it also became essential that no one be left behind. There is no alternative to equip, and nobody is safe until everyone is vaccinated. We looked into the success of our city's COVID prevention communication campaign when planning for the city of Kigali's vaccine strategy. Additional support from the Partnership for Health Cities helped us launch a comprehensive campaign to ensure that every resident would be aware of vaccine availability, understand its effectiveness and safety, and know when and where to get vaccinated. The campaign sought to overcome vaccine misinformation and the hesitance to help achieve the city's goal of vaccinating all eligible population. Allow me to tell you that the result of a resounding success was a resounding success. By now, for instance, the vaccination coverage is 154% of Kigali's eligible population who received the first dose. Why? Because the citizens within the city have been vaccinated, and the coverage also covers the people in the surrounding of the city that work within the city and sleep out the city. And 141% had received the second dose, while 67.1% have now received the third dose, the booster. The vaccination continues now, focusing on the booster dose. In a city of 1.1 million people, the campaign series of images and videos and more than 2.8 million impressions on Twitter. 9 digital billboards located at key intersections in the city reached an estimated number of 1.7 million viewers weekly. Complementing the digital campaign, almost 3,750 community workers were trained on COVID-19 vaccine effectiveness messaging. This additional resource ensured that information about the available vaccine reached every village in the city. The village is the smallest administrative unit in Rwanda. The community workers were trained in each of 1,158 villages that make the city of Kigali. As we speak now, another round of this campaign is underway, emphasizing the importance of the booster shot. The COVID-19 pandemic has taught us the immense value of public communication, not just providing basic information about COVID-19 pandemic and its effects, but also finding the right words and images to encourage our residents to protect themselves and others from the coronavirus.
Dr. Merard, I will ask you to come to your conclusions, please.
I'm about to conclude. Cities have truly communicated with their residents in new ways. In the city of Kigali, like many other urban leaders around the world, timely, accurate, and empathetic messaging has been so central to our pandemic response. Drawing to the end, we reiterate our thanks to the partnership of Health Facilities Initiative, and the city of Kigali will always remain committed to improving the urban health strategies for better life. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Mayor. It was very insightful to hear about the statistics you mentioned, also the campaign you run, and I'm sure that our colleagues from WHO will reflect on the network of healthy cities question as well. We continue with another continent and a message from Ms. Begoña Villasis Sanchez, Deputy Mayor of Madrid, Spain.
First, let me thank all the organizers of the Geneva Cities Hub for considering the Madrid experience relevant enough to be explained today. COVID-19 has changed every aspect of our lives. Not only the way we live and all the things we used to do before this pandemic seemed to be from other times, but also the way we approach social problems in terms of public response. Moreover, public authorities have learned that more than ever, municipalities, local politics, are the cornerstone of the public response in crisis because of the proximity and the way we can respond more instantly to citizens. And in our city, Madrid, this has been the key point to tackling the pandemic. When the pandemic started and the lockdowns spread all across Europe and later on to the rest of the world, Madrid had an emergency plan that worked quite well in these very first moments of the pandemic. But the reality was that no one could ever imagine that our citizens will be placed in such a precarious situation for so long, and that our economy will be so affected in such a short period of time. It was impossible to preview. And in this sense, the response to this challenge, for example, was to create emergency apartments for elderly people, which some of them were widows, for example, and were suffering for loneliness in April 2020, to accompany them in a grief and provide them social and psychological supports as well as to develop an emergency study on the effect of the crisis on the city's population in order to measure the socio-economic effects of COVID-19. We also were geolocalization, then making predictions of their evolutions in the short and medium term to reach the last family in Madrid that might need their town hall. Because we need to make predictions of the evolution in the short and medium term of the population to reach the last family in Madrid that might need us. Because they were not users of the social services, and that was the first barrier, to make sure we are not leaving anyone behind. To give you an idea of the magnitude, we were serving food daily to 90,000 people, and now around 200,000 people, citizens of Madrid, are in social programs to help them cope with the crisis. Furthermore, we found 600,000 elderly people in our city to check out if they were okay and they needed any kind of help, and to give them companion. And we did this twice. In terms of cooperation and collaborative response, we've proved that collaboration between multi-level administration is an achievement lessons. We now we have 80% of our citizens with a full vaccination schedule in this respect, and despite that Madrid does not have the capacity to buy vaccines or to donate them because we are not the state, thanks to the COVAX strategy, we are part of the first city of the region in the world to collaborate so that the vaccines can reach remote places where it's almost impossible for them to do so. Thanks to the collaboration between UNICEF and Madrid and their action in several regions of Colombia, 2.3 million people will have access to COVID-19 vaccines. Now we have learned that our response to the pandemic was the right one. Thanks to the collaboration between not only municipality, national and regional government, but international organizations, but for the inclusion in our strategy of all 6 universities and high-ranked business school, as well as NGOs in our health cluster. This cooperation between all sectors was finally formally drafted in July 2020, where all political parties in City Council of Madrid approved the Acuerdos de la Villa. Is a shock plan with 352 concrete measures to reactivate Madrid after the pandemic. In this regard, in 2021, with the aim of preparing Madrid for the society of the future and to keep our city aware of possible future crises, we approved the recovery, transformation, and resilience plan for the city of Madrid, which includes 105 transformative investments in key areas of urban actions such as mobility, digital transformation of municipal services and business, ecological connectivity, neighborhood regeneration, and housing, without, of course, forgetting social cohesion, territorial rebalancing, childcare, and gender equality. We know from the city of Madrid that all these actions could have not been carried out without multi-stakeholders approach between public-private collaboration, institutions, organizations, company, and civil society, as well as our neighborhoods. We would like to thank again for the opportunity offered by Geneva Cities Hub to share our experience, and we hope that we've been able to help and inspire you for future actions.
Thank you very much. I think we are inspired to take future action. I think it was very well said that COVID-19 has changed all the aspects of urban life. and we have to adapt to that, and I hope our discussion will contribute to that. Because as the Vice Mayor said, we need all sectors and all stakeholders around the table. And I'm really curious to learn more about the 105 transformative investments in the new resilience plan for Madrid, which can be a good example for other cities. Last but not least, we will hear from the mayor of Niterói, Brazil, Mr. Axel Grael.
We were one of the first cities in Brazil to report the presence of the coronavirus. And unfortunately, we had one of the first deaths in our country. So the city was one of the first cities to get organized to respond to the COVID pandemics. One of the first things we did was to start a workforce with 3 levels of activities. One of them working with getting the hospitals ready, hiring more staff, like medical staff, and buying equipment so we could get ready to a growing demand of people to be treated. Another thing was we were very worried about a large number of families, the people that lost their jobs and people that had no more income, because many of those the commercial activities had to be stopped for a while, so we could protect people and keep them at home safely. And the result of that was many families in need. So we provided the social assistance, even providing funding so they could pass through this difficult moment. We also supported business, local business, so they wouldn't shut down and they wouldn't lose their working places. So another fund was prepared to as informal loans to the local companies so they could survive that difficult moment. We were worried about the economy, and we prepared a strategy to recover the economy. So we just announced a large number of city investments by the city hall, so we can provide jobs as fast as possible and improve our infrastructure and provide opportunities in the city. What I could suggest to other governments, other cities, is that we should worry about in the next time. We should have a better national coordination and also regional and metropolitan coordination, because we had a lot of problems with one local policy and the next city doing something different, and that was difficult to handle as public policy, and also it was difficult for the people because they had missed information. Another thing is we need a permanent monitoring and response organization, so next time we can respond much faster and much better organized at the national, regional, and local level. And another thing is a more efficient communication strategy because what we saw was a lot of misinformation and people supporting some treatments and medicines that were not efficient, and that gave people a lot of doubt on how to proceed and how to protect their families. So these are the main suggestions that we would make to other governments and other cities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mayor Grael. Thank you very much for all three mayors and deputy mayors who joined us and shared experience. And now, hearing all these experiences and recommendations, I would switch to the international organizations and our colleagues from UN Habitat and WHO. And I would start by inviting Graham Alabaster, Chief of UN Habitat Geneva Office, to join the discussion. Graham, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Andras. Well, and also thank you very much to the presenters already we've heard this afternoon. I think what's amazing is that, you know, each time we have one of these epidemic events, I mean, whether it's Ebola or Zika or in this case COVID, we learn something new. Each time we learn something new about how to manage disease. And in this particular case, although we knew that there was a vaccine was going to be developed, what was amazing here is that in the interim, whilst we waited, the traditional public health rules about hygiene came into play, and they were the things which really saved the day. So that's one thing, but of course that's all very well, but you've got to know how to apply those rules. And this is where we saw the difference between the cities which managed well and those that didn't, in their ability to implement you know, good hygiene, traditional public health practices. So, I mean, I think that's something that's very special. We heard some marvellous examples, and you know, this isn't about necessarily technology or anything clever. It's just basic rules about how you manage the movement of people, how you isolate the most vulnerable, and things like this. So there was a lot that we learned from that. One very important point, which two of the earlier speakers mentioned, was the issue of a communication strategy and understanding what's happening locally. Because as you saw, and I think most countries that I was following, you found that there were different, usually negative communications coming out, which causing people to panic unnecessarily, but also, you know, are suggesting that they adopt rather unsafe treatment processes, which themselves are rather risky. So this whole idea of having a city where the leaders, where the people have confidence in the leaders to give them the right information is really critically important. And of course, this isn't just about the health crisis in the current COVID case. It's about managing the economic impact. And for many of the least developed countries, this was, and in fact still is in many parts of the world, still the big challenge, how to overcome the livelihood. So it's really at the city level that the mayor or whoever has this huge responsibility to balance on the one hand what should be the public health approach, but on the other hand how to preserve the livelihood of particularly the most vulnerable and the poorest. So we saw many examples, and this afternoon we've heard already about how the city played a critical role also in monitoring the outbreak. And this is where the granularity of city data is so important in making decisions, and this has been highlighted in many cases. I think also that one thing we learned very well from this particular pandemic, but also previous ones, is the role the city has in mobilizing the communities. And this is perhaps one of the other areas that we saw marvelous responses from around the world, where this amazing community capacity was channeled in the right direction for the benefit of managing this pandemic. And in terms of commonalities, and we heard this afternoon from a couple of our mayors, the whole concept of multi-stakeholder approaches comes alive. It comes alive at the city level. Yes, the ideas are there in national governments, in ministries of health and ministries of planning, but it's only when you come down to the city level that the action planning of the city managers and the application of multi-stakeholder processes really comes into its own. So as we look to the future now, we've heard already that the next pandemic is going to possibly be a zoonotic disease again. That's what the predictions are. And what's so special about zoonotic diseases? Well, in fact, we heard early on in the pandemic about the possible route. We heard many stories about the possible route, about how COVID came to humans, and the fact that it probably originated from some intermediate host. So for this reason, we also need to understand the relationship, not just between people, but also with the animal kingdom and everything else, and understanding the interactions that happen. There are still many diseases that can cause the result from zoonotic infections. I mean, if we go back to the plague outbreaks in the Middle Ages, they were transmitted by rats. So we have to have an understanding, not just of people, but the environment and the animal population. And of course, that will be very important, especially if this new zoonotic disease is transmitted from a domestic animal or something. We have to understand these interactions. So what do we do? What else can we do in the future? I'm going to sort of turn my attention a little bit now to financing and how we manage this, because many local authorities, of course, don't have money to spend on preparedness, and this is one of the biggest challenges. It's fine when a crisis arrives, resources will be made available, but a small amount of that money invested before a pandemic would have a huge contribution to make to preventing such a pandemic. So I think we have to look a bit wider now. We have to look at different forms of financing. There are many new and novel approaches that are coming out, such as challenge funds locally and other ways, particularly that actors at local level can use finance to kickstart and to catalyse some of the larger pots of money that's available. So I think we need to also look at how we help local authorities to do this pre-investment, or if you like, the preparedness and response, and that's one of the key challenges that we have to face. And my final comment, Andres, is that this is all about partnership, and we at UN Habitat, of course, are very mindful of the great work that's been done by WHO in the past in preparing all these amazing guidance, and we're very happy to partner with them to make this a reality at city level and to look at new mechanisms together about how we can apply these amazing instruments. So I'll stop there and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Graham. Thank you for the liaison to WHO, which facilitates my task. I think you emphasized very rightly different aspects of urban health and the complexity of urban life, the economic aspects, the community role, as well as the financing aspects, which is very important. Continued urbanization, as WHO observes, is expected to lead to cities becoming epicenters of disease transmissions, but also tuberculosis, dengue. We can talk about non-communicable diseases and so on. And I think urban health is a very complex challenge, and I'm happy that Ms. Nathalie Rebel, unit head from WHO's Urban Health Division, is with us today. And I would like to give you the floor, Nathalie, to lead us through the thinking of this very complex issue. Nathalie, the floor is yours. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, and I hope you can hear me well. Unfortunately, my video is blocked. I am not allowed to share my camera, so if this can be fixed, I can also be connected through video. But while this is happening, again, thanks a lot to Geneva Cities Hub for the invitation, and also particularly to the honorable mayors for really sharing their experiences and all the actions, but also the good advices that they have given us to take forward in our respective mandates. If you allow me, just very briefly to repeat some of the issues that have been, raised by several before me, that really COVID-19 has served as a wake-up call, right, for many of us, and as a reminder of the importance of urban environments for health and well-being. And I think one thing that we need really to acknowledge that city leaders have been, and still are actually, under enormous pressure from national governments and their own citizens to protect their population's health. And actually, cities have continued to be at the front line, even in their role in vaccine rollout, in order to ensure that vaccine rollout is done in an equitable manner and that also the most vulnerable populations are addressed as a priority. And certainly the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 in cities has really highlighted the critical importance of ensuring that cities and urban areas in general are better prepared for facing health emergencies. So we need to use what we've learned from the experience, and that's why I'm just really want to acknowledge the added, really the big value, the added value of listening to all these, experiences by mayors, city leaders, but also by the technical staff at local government level in their efforts to protect people's health in a very much longer term perspective. Now, if you allow me, I would like to take maybe a more bird's eye view on urban health before my colleague Ludi will be more, deep diving in the emergency preparedness, but also response. And just to highlight again that the prevalence of urban-related disease burdens is really dominant, and it will continue to grow. And Graham already mentioned it. It's due to connectivity of large cities, it's to population growth, to spatial extension, but certainly urbanization is also a key driver for emissions and environmental transformation that are threatening our natural system and then in turn having impact on population's health. And again, we have seen similarly for the pandemic that it is particularly true for the global south. So in the rising non-communicable diseases, but with the same time the persistent threat of infectious diseases and outbreaks, but also violence and injuries, we really see that urban areas are facing a triple burden in cities. And just to mention that the health of a city, again, relies on the health of its population, but also is certainly therefore characterized by the natural ecosystem and the climate. So if we look at urban health in general, all this means that determinants of health and disease need to be considered together with determinants of resilience, of prosperity, of opportunities of human development. So in other words, it's not only about emergency preparedness and response on one hand and climate and resilience, for example, on the other hand. It needs to be interconnected. Those different entry points that address specific issues that are really relevant for urban health, like climate, like jobs, like infrastructure, need to be put together and seen in one and the same goal. And because healthy and sustainable cities and communities cannot depend solely on biomedical solutions, urban governance reform is, really critical. And what sounds so very simple in theory is much less in praxis. And we have heard very good examples, but we also know the challenges that many of our local, colleagues, our local governments face. So to respond to that, there needs to be a recognition of multi-scale linkages downwards, so from national to subnational governments, but also upwards, but also at the same time, these constant links between different sectors, between health and also beyond, and at different scales. So, and I would like really to use the opportunity of this dialogue to highlight the increased role that urban health is playing in WHO's current and overall programmatic approach, where urbanization has clearly been identified as a public health priority, and it's really a priority determinant. It is core to the WHO's 13th Global General Program of Work, and we are really happy to have strengthened this area within our work plan. And this is actually resulting in a key number of principles to take the urban agenda forward. The first one is that, first of all, again, as I was saying, we have recognized the need, even internally in WHO, to reorganize ourselves and to establish a cross-cutting urban health function, which would be in this case that I'm representing here, but it is part of the Secretariat's agenda to support and align WHO's wide efforts on urban health. But the second principle, and in very concrete terms, is that again, the social, environmental, and economic determinants agenda in the emergency preparedness and response need to be brought together in a much more coherent framework. Thirdly, also that it means that we need to strengthen, to build the capacities at the local and the national level to engage people from outside of health and to get health into the curriculum of non-health people. And I would say one last key principle is really that the Secretariat, in our role as a Secretariat, we are really putting much more emphasis in discussing and exploring with our member states governance mechanisms for the stronger involvement of local governments in decision-making processes, but also our direct support to local governments. So in conclusion, and really to build on many issues that Graham has already mentioned, WHO is not only continuing, but is really scaling up the concrete provision of technical support for regional and national response plans for urban health, with a large number of activities that I'm not going to go in detail with, but it's reaching from strengthening the research on urban health, doing health impact assessment and risk assessment, identifying key interventions, using better data for health at urban scale, awareness raising and communication, this was mentioned, raising and building capacities through the development of training programs, but then also, and this is my last point, also to support the better connection between cities and the better exchange. And we had the Honorable Mayor in the beginning that has been also speaking as part of the Partnership for Healthy Cities. This is just one example of many that is showing that actually we need to rely and build on experiences from cities, and we in WHO are promoting this. So thanks again for having me with you today, and I'm looking forward to hearing more of the experiences and underlining here with really our commitment to support global efforts to work more closely at the local level to support health and the implementation of the SDGs. Back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Natalie, for this very comprehensive overview of this rather complex issue. We took good note of the messages you delivered, and it will definitely be a continuation of our discussions and thinking here. And now I would like to invite Ludi Prapancha Suryantoro, Unit Head of Multisectoral Engagement for Health Security at WHO, to bring us down to the more focused issue of pandemic preparedness. The floor is yours, Ludi.
Thank you very much, and I also would like to greet the previous speaker, and also all the points have been raised, and I'm very pleased to be here. So just like my colleagues have mentioned, that Natalie is doing the coordination inside WHO. Where I'm coming from is the World Health Emergency Preparedness Program. So the program is really related to all the strengthening public health emergencies, whether naturally occur, deliberate, or accidental. So this is an important subject matter in terms of urban preparedness, and I'm pleased to be here. I don't want to reiterate the point that's already raised, the lesson that is already mentioned earlier. The solution also has been shared today. And I think I would like to share in this forum is really about what exactly is the effort in moving forward in building this emergency preparedness through a whole government approach, whole society approach, and multi-sectorality. And I think the challenge is unlimited. There are many of lessons learned out there. So it is recognized by the WHO member states the importance of city authority in their role in terms of prevention, preparedness, and response of all public health emergency of international concern. Now, the word of international concern is guided by our legal framework called the International Health Regulations. Under the International Health Regulations, countries are obliged to build their capacity to prevent, detect, and response. This also applies to subnational, this is the local authorities, the city authorities, I think different government has different way of structure, federations or the separate autonomy, government level. So WHO in 2020, the WHO member states already passed resolutions in terms of strengthening health emergency preparedness, particularly strengthening the implementation of international health regulation as our legal mandate. Through this, the recommendation was very clear and sound from member states that WHO Secretariat needs to address the urban level, the local level, on how we can work together between national and subnational. So this has been a recommendations constantly that is being proposed in 2020 under Resolution WHO 73.8. Since then, we are working very closely with WHO, and I'm very pleased today. Just last January, during the executive board, our DG has launched the emergency, strengthening health emergency preparedness in the urban setting. This is a very important milestone for us. And thank you, UN Habitat as one of the key contributors and others around the member states, plus some local authorities that is also joining, like Mexico. It's been a very important, actors in developing this framework. Now, this framework is also published with the operational guidelines. So our plan, together in partnership, in close partnership, because no single institution can respond in the future unless we work together. So we would like to operationalizing the framework. We would like there are 8 core capacities that is identified as a way forward on how we can, I think it's been reiterated many times, saving life, securing the economy, but it's also connecting cities. I think more and more cities becoming more international, international traffic, travel, and trade, not to forget this trade as well as part of it, is going to be much double in 2030. It is a shared responsibility between national and subnational to work together. WHO, including in its mandate, is to support member states, to support countries, including subnational, in terms of enhancements, their capacity to prevent and detect and response. With that in mind, we are also, during the launch with our Director General on the 13th January 2022, there is a recommendation to build the Global Prepared City platforms. Now, this platform is not a network. We are welcome of every network that can contribute to the emergency preparedness. And I think no single institution can provide one solution. And to do this, we are engaging with our member states and some key countries. And there are a good response from, Japan, from China, from a number of member states of WHO who are committed to move forward with the operationalizing the framework. So I think in moving forward, like what UN Habitat has already mentioned, the need of looking at broadly. It's not only just health solution, but it's all multisectional solutions. We are working with the FAO-OIE in the context of Global Action Plan for One Health. And city authority, as you can see, this is not the central economy, but it's also when it comes to wet market, slaughtering house, and also domestic animals and wild animals that are coming to the city because of deforestation. So there are already a lot of impact coming towards us. So this has to be a whole government collaboration. Within the framework, we are also developing a tool, because in the future we need to come up with innovations, we need to come up with a workforce. As workforce identified as the key challenges. So WHO also, with this GPCP or Global Prepared City platform, we established a much larger, in the context of emergency preparedness in general, we call the Global Strategic Preparedness Network. Here we are working with all key actors from IFRC, UNICEF, NGO, local NGO, academia. These are the moment where we can building back better. Because pandemic is not a surprise. I've been in this business since 2003. When it comes to the SARS, we keep mentioning to many different authorities that this is going to be happening. And then when you when you look at it, you know, the line between Ebola to Zika and then now is very short. This is quite worrying. In the meantime, we need to guard the economy. So the policymaker has a decision to be made. The frustration of the populations, the information that is not correct, the data has to be managed. And I think we need to work together to provide what the GPCP could be working together. We have a plan to have a meeting, to have a brainstorming and the technical working group, and we would welcome, you know, ideas. We would welcome, you know, participations. And looking at one of the key aspects in the city is also public-private. When we talk about access, there are many access that is provided by private sectors. And this needs to have a very solid foundation of communication, locally, regionally, and globally. We need to monitor the global initiatives that is covering from financing to manufacturing to the workforce development and the community engagement. And I think there are ways of us that WHO is a convener in bringing everybody together. We work, as I said, closely with our member states, and it's coming in the WHO. And we look forward for the GPCP launch sometimes this year. We are planning with the pilot countries together with our regional office, WHO. There are already some, you know, initiatives like government of Singapore is very interested because they're looking at $9 billion or, you know, a lot of economy downturn due to the pandemic. It's not a surprise like any city. But it's also to enhance the speed up the knowledge, the know-how, the solution, and also cross-regionally, not only just sharing from what the model in Pacific could work in Caribbean, but it's also looking at solution what Africa has already done to the European. So there is no single continent that would have the best answer unless we work together. So in closing, I'm looking forward to operationalize this together with you and have a dialogue, an open dialogue, and I'm happy to be here, especially with UN Habitat, and moving forward, we will have a shared responsibility in this area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rudy. It was really very interesting to hear about the whole government, whole society approach you mentioned. And I hope that our event will also contribute to sharing the information about the new framework. And we are very happy to continue the discussion with WHO on the global prepared city platform during this year. Thank you for our experts from the international organizations. And now I would like to invite our partners from the civil society. First of all, Jose Alvarez, who is a policy officer of the United Cities and Local Governments, to share your organization's experiences with the interaction of cities and local authorities. But also feel free to comment on anything you already heard during today's session. Jose, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Andres. Thank you first to the Geneva Cities Hub for hosting this event, which we think is incredibly relevant. And thank you also to the local leaders and the mayors and the vice mayors who have spoken before and who have provided their insights and the work that they've been doing during the pandemic, as well as to WHO and UN Habitat for contributing as well and for laying out their priorities and the way ahead. So it's complex for me to speak about what UCLG is doing, because what UCLG is doing is it's what our members are doing. We represent over 250,000 local and regional governments, either who are members of UCLG or whose national organizations are a part of the World Organization. So what we have been doing has been basically accompanying and supporting mayors in their initiatives during the pandemic. Members of UCLG, local and regional governments, some of which have intervened today, have been on the front line, and they've been the first respondents, and their focus on providing basic services and protect their populations is what really has driven the response of UCLG during this pandemic. So what we've been doing is elevating their voices towards the international stage. In last year's high-level political forum, which had SDG 3 as one of the focus, we brought local practices gathered in the report that the Global Task Force of Local and Regional Governments provides to the high-level political forum. We gathered the innovative measures of local and regional government throughout the early stages of the pandemic and their views on how to recover into this report, which we provided, as we do every year, to the high-level political forum. And one of these conclusions that came up in the report is that the innovative policies that local and regional governments are being set in place, which have often been criticized because, as some of the mayors have said before, they were the first respondents, and many of the measures that were driven were challenged when nobody really knew what the response was. Some of these innovative measures that have been brought from the local level, from the ground up, need to be built upon and need to be held as maybe measures that can provide a way forward in times of crisis. With these inputs from mayors, UCLG has also been working together with WHO. We've been part of the Urban Preparedness Working Group, which held a series of consultations to prepare this very report that I think Ludi was presenting earlier, the Strengthening Health Emergency Preparedness in an Urban Setting. We've been bringing some of the key cases from local and regional governments to the table. We've also been bringing our perspectives, focusing as well on building on what Natalie was saying earlier, focusing on the need to build bridges between spheres of government, to enhance communication between local, regional, and national governments in order to be better prepared for crises such as this one, and to perhaps have clearer linkages and clearer engagement in what everyone needs to do in these cases. In this case, we've also been involved in the development of the urban health research agenda, which WHO has been engaged in developing. With our Secretary General was involved in consultations, and we again brought the needs and what our members have been telling us that needs to be considered when developing an agenda for research in health issues at the local level. And I think one of the points that I think I want to end with is that is again bringing it back to the necessity of multilateralism and multi-stakeholder engagement. UCLG has also been very engaged in the movement to achieve universal health coverage, which I think is, while it is a different aspect of health, of course, in cities, I think is incredibly relevant when we come to discuss pandemics. Health coverage for all includes obviously access to vaccination for all, which is a key point of contention that has been brought up. That if vaccines are the way to protect everyone during a crisis such as COVID-19, how do we ensure that they reach all of the populations equally, and what is the role that local and regional governments can play in ensuring a fair and equal distribution of vaccines? So in this regard, our work on universal health coverage has also been to bring the voices of local and regional governments to this, to ensure that any and all conversations on the response to crisis, on how to protect population, counts on the voices of those that have been responding first, that have information on the ground, that have been enduring this from the very early from the very early stages of the pandemic. And I think one of the key issues going forward is that we need to make sure that these multi-level conversations, that this conversation between local, regional, and national governments is maintained and fostered going forward, in order to be able to develop key guidelines together to ensure that to ensure coordination. And also bringing to the table, UCLG is working on developing conversations between local and regional governments and civil society organizations, and as well as bringing other spheres of government into the table. But we are working on ensuring that this alignment between not just different spheres of government, but also different stakeholders, to ensure that in crises such as this one, we are aligned, we are better able to respond. And this is one of the key issues, I believe, in order to increase our possibilities to mitigate the impact of this and further crisis. multilateralism is one of the key responses. We need to make sure that local and regional governments are included in global conversations. We've been working on doing this, as I said earlier, with WHO and with other organizations to ensure that views from local respondents are included in the response to any crisis, but also to mainstream this, to ensure that spaces are provided in other situations. I will leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jose, and thanks for all your work. The role of city networks is very important in this field as well. And now I would like to move to another player in civil society, academia, and invite Ms. Lida Osorio, who will join us from the Universidad del Valle Cali, Colombia, to share with us her experiences and also to comment on others if you wish. Lida, the floor is yours. Please unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, clear and loud.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Andres, for the invitation, and Geneva City Hub for organizing the meeting and allowing me to listen to all the previous speakers and learn from their experiences and recommendations to move forward. I'm based in Cali, Colombia. Is the third largest city in Colombia, southwest of Colombia. And I'm here in Cali is around 2.6 million people. And we also have a migrant population, mainly from Venezuela. So I think one of the previous speakers mentioned something about migrant population. So when we talk about urban health, I think we need to include all those population, including those that in nowadays we face around the world. That is the migrant population, and that poses a challenge when we're trying to respond to large emergencies, including COVID and others. When I have a previous talk prepared, but now I'm going to change it because all the previous speakers. So I thought I want to react to some of the comments that were made before, and I will start with you, Andres. You mentioned this is not over. We haven't finished yet this pandemic, and for that reason, it's very difficult to assess what is an adequate response yet, and what are the outcomes that we want to achieve. Initially, was for us in Cali was low mortality. That was like the main indicator for us, and then we monitor excess mortality, and that way we evaluate ourselves in Cali for the response. Today, that has been our main indicator, but as you mentioned before, and other speakers mentioned before, there are other impacts that we also to monitor, and are also health related. You talk about dengue, tuberculosis, familiar violence, domestic violence, mental health, excess mortality due to other causes, and also the economic component as well. So, and then the impact in the environment, for example, for the use of masks and other impacts that we are causing in the environment due to the response that we have. So for me, it's very difficult yet to comprehensively assess or define what is a good response. And previously, we have seen how Hong Kong, for example, has been praised as an excellent response, and now today is facing one of the highest mortality rates in the world. So with that had said, I think it's still, we are still constructing this success story for the different cities. And the responses that I have seen that the previous speaker mentioned have been different. There are some commonalities, but they are different. And I also analyze here what happened in our city in Colombia is that the response that is dynamic. You adjust according to what you evaluate what works in your context, but also the challenges you face because they are different, and the priorities change every day. So initially it was the pandemic, and then there was the lockdown. That was the priority. But then after the lockdown has its consequences, then other priorities came. Taking care of the vulnerable, the economics, the jobs, the small companies that disappear. All these become with a higher priority than what we will strictly call health. And the analysis we did from the public health perspective, those are also health issues. the economy, the jobs, the companies that also health issues, because they have what we call the social determinants of health. They impact the livings of the people. So when we talk about health, we usually use a more comprehensive concept, which is public health, including the social determinants of health. And I think when Natalie mentioned the importance of health in the different curricula with all disciplines, I think what I want to go is beyond that, and is the concept of public health in society. We all are responsible for public health. So it's not only a curriculum or something that the engineers or the economists take into account, but every single person has influence in the health or is responsible for the health condition of the others, themselves, their immediate families, but also as a whole in a society. And if everyone assumes their responsibility, including the politicians, the communicators, the academia, I think that we will have that trust that will unite us all in this response that is required. And that was when a personal a reflection that I have to do from the academia is that I have to speak out loud about public health, because it was very difficult for me initially as academic to communicate with economists, the planning department, the transport department about public health, even to the health insurers, because they saw public health at those activities that the government is responsible for. So the health insurers were responsible for their insurance, but they saw that the initial responses to sanitation that were mentioned before were not their responsibility. That was the government responsibilities, because that's public health. Sanitation is public health, or even vaccines. So that dialogue is very difficult when you don't have this conceptual framework to work together. So I think it's speaking loud of what public health is and how everyone is responsible for public health. It's very important. I think the other is that the sustainability is the other keyword. The response of the cities, I think, depends very much on, and this is not my conclusion, but something that I read, depends very much on what the capacities they already have in place. So if you're good at communicating with your community, then that's very good. You're going to do with that before. But if you are not good at communicating with your community, that's very difficult to build that in the frame of an emergency. But those capacities are not sustainable necessarily. And one of the things of the barriers to that sustainability is the fact that the government changes periodically, and they come with their own people, with their own practices. So we have that situation in Colombia where we change government every 4 years. And then we have a new government starting 2 months before the pandemic. And they were just starting to get settled. And that makes it difficult because I don't know if it's this something, but it seems that you are born, or the city is born every time that there is a new government. So I think it comes to the governance. So if you have in place, perhaps it's what you do in Geneva Cities Hub. I need to study more what you do, but if you help this governance in the city, that every interested party is represented, not talking about political party, but different interests in the community and organized civil society, academia, or companies, economy, etc. They are represented and they have a say there. They have a voice in what to do. I think that's a way to give more sustainability to the capacities that the city have to respond to emergencies. So I think it's an essential part of public health as the governance as well. And finally, I wanted to say something that Begoña mentioned, and is about vulnerability. We have one advantage here is that we early on have a risk map of vulnerability. We identify where the vulnerable population was located. And that vulnerability index is going to change depending on the emergency. You mentioned, for example, the zoonotic disease, then the vulnerability will change where you have, for example, more birds, if that's the reservoir, for example. So vulnerability is not a fixed term for each specific situation. You have to define and validate your vulnerability indexes. So that way, the response can be focused and prioritized to those areas. It's impossible to to have an homogeneous entire response for the city. You need to focus on those that are more vulnerable. There are no capacities enough to respond to everyone. So that we have that. And for that, you need to have good geographical information systems, GIS systems, management of real-time data, capacities for that, and also have the capacity then to unite all those people that are able to support you in the response to this vulnerable population. So something that I thought was key in Cali was vulnerability, identification, prioritize those based on your capacities, and also with the elderly people here and the elderly homes, then we were able to build that information very quickly, because we identified very quickly also in the world that there was the most vulnerable population. So when you identify an emergency, who are the most vulnerable, design the adequate, valid vulnerability indexes, and you have information systems and real-time data, you know where they are, you can help them. Otherwise, it's very difficult, and then you build them inequity, and the impact is going to be even worse. Finally, a word about technology. I think UN Habitat, I'm going to close in with this one. Technology, what a difficult word, I would say. Very, very difficult word. And I just want to share this anecdote. When I was talking to one of the secretary of the mayors on the response, I was talking about public health, sanitation, primary care, because that's where most people was going to be going, primary care. And he was talking about mechanical ventilators and how many they have to buy. It was a very difficult talk, because the message was this technology, and we heard the mayor in Niteroi say that he was very proud they got this capacity going, capacity of the highest level, where probably minority people is going to go, but the majority of people that need to be cared is the primary care. And there was very few investment or discussion about how to strengthen primary care. There was mostly this technology, and now it's buying vaccines, but we still need to do the hand washing, the mask, and you know, going to the vaccine. So it's not the technology, as people say, no, it's not the vaccine, it's the immunization program that works. So again, I think it's a very difficult word that we need to put in context. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lida. I'm very happy that we managed to have a really multi-stakeholder discussion today, because it's eye-opening and insightful. Before I give the floor to our last speaker today, I invite everyone to write your questions to the chat or write down around the table, because we will have a short 15 minutes left at the end of the session for those. Our last speaker is Mr. Nicola Garbi, Principal Advisor at the City of Madrid, Spain, who will join us online. And we thank you, Nicola, for having the time. And please, the floor is yours for your comments and insights.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me correctly? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much, Andres. Thank you very much for the Geneva Cities Hub for this initiative and for inviting Madrid. I'm sorry if you hear some noise, but we are in a real estate fair in France, and I'm connecting from here. So I will not repeat what my vice mayor already said in the video, and also what colleagues already extensively explained. I will just maybe bring an example. That is the example that Madrid is actually experiencing, and that actually theoretically already reunite the different, let's say, or some of the needs that the previous speaker have identified. But for some reasons, it still doesn't work. So Madrid, as you know, is a city part of the European Union, and in the European Union we have an extremely interesting example of a multi-level governance system that actually, is proposing us a policy framework, but also resources, no, especially for the recovery. Still, from the city, taking, let's say, the three main steps of the crisis, so the preparedness, the direct impact, no, the immediate impact of the crisis. I remember that Madrid was the second city that has been, let's say, affected in Europe after the Milano area, and then the recovery. In these three different main phases, we must say that even if we count on a country as Spain that has quite advanced decentralization process, and we are in the framework of the European Union, still it has been extremely difficult, and is still very difficult to face these phases. So in terms of preparedness, I would just like to focus on the issue of competencies, and it's clear that the most critical aspect that we have experienced in the city is the fact that the competence here in Spain is at a regional level, and the coordination with the central administration, with the European authorities, and with the local authorities, in the case the city, has not worked. This is something that we should reflect on, but still we see that still today the issue of how not review competencies, because it's not about that, but is on how we can enhance the capacity of coordination between the different levels of governments, is not one of the priority on the table of the discussion. So this is a clear indicator for us that even if we identify the problem and we identify the actors that should discuss and develop new scenarios and possibly a solution, this is not identified as a priority and is not on the table. So this is a big concern for us. Impact, the immediate impact on the crisis. As most cities, in reality, we didn't have any guidance from our central administration, from the case of the European Union. This came late, the time for them to consult and to establish a position, and we totally understand this, and we respect it. However, we needed to give an immediate response, and actually what has been extremely useful is the city-to-city cooperation dynamic. Concretely, Madrid, we count a lot, really a lot, significantly, with the support of Chinese cities. This is something that I want to highlight, because we demonstrated that the capacity of cities to move internationally is much more agile, let's say, but still the impact could be much more important if we were able to do it together with our state authorities. So also there was a city-to-city response, but this is not what we were seeking. We were seeking actually a coordination with our central administration in this sense. And finally, recovery. Recovery, as you know, Europe as the US, but I would say that Europe is the let's say the region where we were able to give a massive response in terms also of financial support to member states and so to cities. Just to make an example, Spain will receive 140 million euro in these 2 years, actually, to be spent for recovery. Fine. We didn't, and this is not just a problem of Spanish cities, it's a problem that we can also identify in some surveys that some European city network have made. Cities have not been involved enough in the process of developing the recovery plan and then in the allocation of resources. And so just taking these three examples in a very privileged context as the one of Madrid being an European Union city, we understand that still there is a lot of work to do, because also now that we have the possibility to involve cities in the member state discussion and also in a multilateral space, at least as the European Union, this is not enough. And cities are still considered let's say, the one that have to give the immediate response, and also the one that after have to implement no, the project and the resources that are coming from other level of governance. So this is a proof, unfortunately, an indicator at least, that we have to put on the table as a priority the relation between local authorities and member states in the context of crisis, preparedness, impact, and recovery. And so it's very important what the work you are starting now, and we will be very happy to support it. Just a final note on the fact that, as Jose explained earlier, I mean, we advanced incredibly in terms of city networks and the multilateral space, also thanks to a network like UCLCG, of which Madrid is part. But now we need to do another type of work, that is the work on enhancing the capacity of coordination, the multi-level, as Nathalie said at the beginning, multi-level, multi-sectoral. I would add also applying the subsidiarity principle in terms of the relation between local authorities and member states. We are doing great work as networks, but this is a line of work, and this has to be complemented with the most significant one, that is the one that have to put around the same table local authorities and member states. And again, it's not about reviewing competencies, it's more about enhancing the coordination, reduce the fragmentation, and apply in the reality the subsidiarity principle. So working together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Thank you for all our speakers. If you can bear with us for another 10-15 minutes, I would love to open the floor for questions. We have collected 3 online, and I wonder if around the table someone has a question, please. My plan is to collect all questions, and then I would give back the floor in reverse order to our speakers to choose one question or to make a final remark really in 1 minute. So any questions around the table?
Thank you very much, Andras. And I have to say this event has really worked as an eye-opener for me. And I think we cannot talk about prevention, preparedness, response, let alone recovery, as Nicola has just said from Madrid, without cities. It's been said and said many times during this event that cities are agile, they can provide a swift response to crisis. There's a lot of city-to-city cooperation that is very valuable in terms of exchange of good practices. So my question really goes to WHO, actually. You are a central actor, no? And you've been put on the stage. Sorry, I'm looking at you, Ludi, here. But how you play here a role of convener, you know, right. And you've published this very useful framework, guidance for national and local authorities on strengthening health emergency preparedness. But how do you do concretely to work with all these stakeholders? We heard about negotiations that have started on Monday at WHO about how to strengthen and preparedness, prevention and response to pandemic. It's mainly among states, there are observers, but how do you ensure that all these different sectors of societies can participate and share, above all, their good practices in order to basically make sure that we respond better to the next health emergency? Sorry, I've been...
Thank you very much. Before we continue with the questions, Nathalie Rebel just mentioned she needs to leave us in a minute. So if you are still with us, I would first give you back the floor for a 1-minute concluding remark. Nathalie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And maybe instead of a concluding remark, I can use the opportunity of Antu's question, maybe to respond it from my end. There are obviously several ways of the involvement of the multiple players, and I will give you one in particular that I think is fundamental. I highlighted the role of capacity building. There is the need of raising capacities of the health sector and the non-health sector as the relevance of urban policies for health. So for us, there is a clear need of building those capacities at the government side, but also at the side of civil society, even I would say communicators, communities themselves, etc. So one of the big areas and focus areas of WHO's work as regards to the broader urban health agenda will be to develop a comprehensive urban health training program, hopefully to be delivered in a collaboration with the WHO Academy, that certainly will then serve to build those capacities at the different levels. So this is just to give you one very concrete way of bringing different people around the table. A second one, again, and I will conclude on this one, is a more strategic level. As I was also saying in my intervention, there is a need of strategically framing the urban health issue along those different entry points: economic, ecologic, social. And therefore, WHO needs to come up with a strategy that will enable local governments, with the support of national governments, to implement healthy policies. So that framing, that strategic, needs to bring together along the consultation representatives from the different governments at the national level, the region. This is what we are doing with our consultations. Mostly technical consultations, but certainly consultation that will feed into that processes. So I hope this is one answer to your question. Back to you, and thank you very much. And I apologize, I need to disconnect.
Thank you, Natalie, and thank you again for joining us. We are looking forward to continue our cooperation.
Thank you.
Other hand around the table. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Judith Kosenko from UNITAR, actually the United Nations Institute for Training and Research. And we recently had a discussion with the WHO Academy on capacity buildings. And I just wanted to mention that we found it very important, and this is great, and congratulations to the organizers to bring together that many actors and players in this very important discussion and topic. And also UNITAR would be happy to join on the capacity building side. We just changed our strategy and included health into our priority pillars from this year onwards, and we're also happy to support in this regard. And my question would be also for anyone, and all of the speakers actually would be great to hear. When it comes to lessons learned from this pandemic and economic crisis, what would you identify as the most important lesson learned for future preparedness? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any other question? If not, I will read quickly the free ones from online. Which municipal level practices can be replicated or scaled up at national level to diminish vulnerabilities of cities? Another question, how local and regional governments can contribute to achieve the WHO triple billion target. I guess it's for you, Luli. Yeah, it was already mentioned by Nicola, how to enhance the cooperation among the different levels from international, national, and local. So please choose from these questions or just make a final comment from your side. And I will now ask the speakers in reverse order to come in. So we start with you, Nicola. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Andras. Actually, I would just like to thank you again and to make a request, if I may, that is to continue to do this work together. I mean, I think it's very important, no, as everyone stated, to cooperate more, to understand the position of each other, to really do this enhancement we've been talking about in the different frameworks. So, voilà, that's just a call to everybody, you know, to continue to maintain this space for collaboration between cities, member states, city network, and organization of the UN. In this sense, just to briefly mention that it has been a pleasure for us to support also the elaboration of the cities report on a pandemic that UN Habitat has prepared, and we want to continue to support the multilateral processes as a city, as member of networks, but we really need to enhance the direct dialogue with our member states. So the multilateral actors are for us of great support for our also internal communication. So thank you again, and I hope we'll be able to continue this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Lida?
Yeah, thank you. I think I want to answer like several questions in my comment, I think so. One is that I think I said in the lesson learned personally was speak loud about public health with this, very big umbrella of what public health is, which is not only healthcare, which usually is confused with, but with public health. And we train in public health. We at the university, we train and we do all the time capacity building. So capacity building, it's very important, but we need to think also in those skills that we usually don't train people. Those skills that are key to implement the knowledge, to make things happen in real time, that are able to reach those that usually these policies left out. And I think this is the way how we can help to reach that 3 billion, to make things happen in the field, that are not only in the book that you have there on the table. That's one important step. But then the big gap is how you make that happen in the real scenarios with the challenges, different challenges that people face in the field, in their context, in the neighborhood. I think part of the training that is needed to do that, to build that gap, to make that gap narrower, is to train people in what we call the soft skills, which actually are so important, like leadership. And we have seen around the world, don't have to give you examples of how leadership and the kind of leadership that we have in the world impacts what we do in the field and how people is affected every day. So more positive leadership, more distributed leadership. How do you share the knowledge that you have with others, but also how to listen to others to make better decisions, or to take better decisions? How to work with people you don't trust, or you don't even know, or you don't understand. How to work together when there is so much untrust. We don't know each other, but we are able to talk here. Academia, researchers have been showing us that that's feasible, that that's possible. But you have talked about coordination. Coordination doesn't happen between cities, happen between people that run these cities, that live in those cities, that have different knowledge, different cultural backgrounds, and different expectations and interests. So we need training in those aspects in how to work together. So that will be my response to some of the questions that you have said then. And again, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Lida. Jose, let's continue with you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'll try to be as brief as possible, but when it comes to lessons learned, I think one of the lessons that local and regional leaders have learned during this pandemic is that we're only as strong as the weakest among us, and that protecting everyone is key. And also I'd like to address the question of enhancing cooperation. And I think, as Nicolas said, working together in these spaces, bringing different actors together, and building spaces for local and regional governments for interaction between stakeholders and national governments is one of the key ways to bring different stakeholders together to enhance cooperation and to make sure that this coordination that we're all looking for actually happens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jose. And now I'm looking to our speakers here in the room. Ludi, would you?
Thank you so much. For first of all, appreciate for having this meeting, and thank you for the interest and the towards WHO. Regarding, I would like to just answer a question regarding the ongoing international negotiating body. This process is looking at various of the recommendations has been made by the member states. and then it was decided by member states of WHO to hold a continued working group. So it's a member state leading process at the moment. What it means is that even we as a secretariat, we are at the back seat. We are still in a discussion between countries at the moment. But the recognition under multisectorality, the subnational, has been repeatedly mentioned in the other resolution. Now, I think the discussion is still dynamic right now because we are not in the leading process. As I said, this is a member state leading process. Hopefully our member state that is currently ongoing this week, in fact, can reiterate the issues of what you just mentioned about the inclusivity. And I think in terms of the principle, I think inclusivity is always been included. But I think there are prioritization and process that needs to be, to be respected. There are governing bodies process, there are process that needs to be leads towards, our member states moving forward in the WHO. This assembly is going to be the most hardest because we have huge agenda. It's one of the most tightest, meetings. I mean, I don't know, 52 resolution. I think it's one of the highest in history. So I think, while the member states are moving forward, what we can do is I think we can continue our dialogue because sooner or later there will be some, what kind of solution, what kind of proposal. And here we are in the listening mode. We need to listen to every actors and every contributors in the future. So I think that is somehow is a political movement at the moment. They're looking at future the dynamic of preparedness and response, but the member states is recognizing the needs of working cross-sectorality, whole society that mentioned. On the practical note, coming from my own unit, we just mentioned about vulnerability. We do have that tool. We do have hotspot. We do have many tools, but I think it's the issue of leadership and ownership. As long as there is a lack of ownerships, I think it's going to be a problem. Now, the cross-sectorality in our unit is really trying to get to this type of the big elephant in the room. For instance, how scientific evidence can influence policymaker. This is a huge, and I can understand the frustration from the academia because that is what we need to listen to each other between cross-sectorally. We are working with different actors and different, solution provider. Let's put it that way, in terms of institution, or organization. So we are working, for instance, we have this national collaboration framework between military and civilian. When you look at it during vaccination, it's not public health. It is the military who come to the ground. So we work with the International Civil Medicines, Military Medicines in Brussels with their 185 countries, and we realized that how the military hospital is also open for public during the pandemic as well as public health. You have laboratory and others. So I think we need to come up with a clear collaboration. The other, we are just issuing a publication, well, it will be next week, the handbook for the parliamentarian. When you look at it, leadership and ownership, this is where the hardcore is. The ownership of the government, recognizing pandemic preparedness is one of the priorities. Recognizing the subnational actors should be part of the solution in the future, internationally, regionally. And that is the primary objective that we are trying to do, to get the basic knowledge of what international health regulation, what is the international obligations. They're coming from different walk of life, and they're not understanding what is in front of us in terms of what the policymakers. So I think as a homework, we have a lot of different priorities in the urban. We have an urban not looking at operational issues. We can look at it, the policy, the bigger issues. And then we can also looking at that more robust research, robust what the academia has mentioned, research in agenda, looking at much more data that is reliable and financing that can be provided. So I think this work will continue. We are working. We look forward to work with any partners that is out there, including our member states, so that can move the agenda faster to inspire our member states on doing so. But your point is well taken, and we listen very carefully. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lulu. And then last but not least, Graham.
Thanks so much. Well, I think for me, we've got to move ahead in two ways. I think, and this is happening to a certain extent now, but for a lot of these diseases that we're talking about, there's a very good understanding of how to manage. Okay, COVID is one that's come along where we didn't have a treatment for, and we had to develop a vaccine. But for many of the other diseases that cause these problems around the world, there is a known way to handle them. The difference is that this information hasn't been targeted towards urban settings, most of it. Particularly things like the vector-borne disease has been developed based on a rural model, right? So there's a whole need to re-look at all of this information and adapt it to urban areas. This, in fact, we've been doing this for WHO on the new urban malaria guide, which is due to come out very soon. But it's looking at the knowledge we have and adapting it to the urban setting. Because, of course, urban is not one size fits all. Urban comes in different shapes and sizes. So that's the one side. We have to look at the technical guidance, and we have to reform it in many cases. The city, yes, of course, the town, wherever you want to call it. There's also a need to look at the physical arrangements in urban settings, because so many of these will influence the diseases that we're going to see, and particular things. When COVID comes into a city, the comorbidities that go along with COVID will depend on whether you live in a city where the air pollution is bad, or whether there's problems from waterborne, water and sanitation. So we have to understand how that urban environment, how that urban setting affects the different comorbidities, and we have to understand that balance. So again, this is something that's very, very important. We've heard time again today about the nimble nature of cities in their response to this emergency. And the other thing that we also can take advantage of, I think, which isn't really explored too much at the moment, is that local authorities and cities can also be nimble in setting policy, because many of them have the power to set bylaws, and it's quite easy for them to pass that through their legislative processes. And it's much quicker than waiting for national level implementation. So we're not saying you're working independently of national government. No, you're working with, you're interpreting, but you're putting bylaws which fit the context of where you're trying to work. So I think there's a whole area that we could explore there, which will greatly improve the efficiency and delivery of healthcare services, both from the health sector and from outside of the health sector.
Thank you very much, Graham. And thank for all our speakers, as well as our attendees here in the room and online. I take away from this discussion that the need to include cities and local governments in this global discussion on health and pandemic preparedness is as relevant as ever. So we will continue our good work on that file, and we are very much looking forward to work with all of you. Once again, thank you, and see you at our next Geneva Urban Debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.